Vodkast. Welcome. It's a new year. Jeff Manchester here. It's a new Vodkast. I have less hair on my face. A little bit less hair on my head. I'm getting older. Little chin there. Happening there. But no, I mean, this is the Vodkast. If you want to write a question in and have it answered by me, or mix, listen to, write me at vodcastpodcaster@gmail.com. By the way, if you're going to send me a mix to get reviewed, just like send it to me in a downloadable format. I can't really work with links to SoundCloud and YouTube. Anyway, I guess I could just plug it into a third-party site and rip it, but that's too much work and shady. So send me a link. Give me permission. Send me a download link, and I'll do my best to make time for it and listen to it. And by the way, thanks for people who've been patient. I have some people who've asked questions like back in like late October, so I really appreciate the patience. We're going to get to a lot of those questions and mixes today. And just before I get into it, this channel, I feel I have to talk about it, has grown, in my view, tremendously. It's a niche channel. Like, it's not, I'm not doing like makeup tutorials that you know about. It's a niche channel, and I feel like the people who are on here are clearly learning something, which is what it's always been about, helping people make better music. And so I just want to say thanks to anyone who has helped me and helped the channel grow along the way in 1 year. I feel like you should say along the way if it's been like 25 years. It's been 1 year, and I'm probably going to hit 3,000 subscribers soon, and that just means so much to me. So, and it also means to me that you like what I'm doing, and what I'm doing is helping people learn, and that's what this channel is always going to be about. If it ever becomes not about that, then it'll just go dead. I'll just kill it, because the original intent was to help people learn, people who maybe can't afford to go to audio engineering school, people who maybe don't have the best sort of friends to listen to their music, they can't really trust their ears or whatever. You can see me, you can see my work, and you can judge for yourself whether or not I'm a good person to have your mix bounced off of. So that's what the channel's always been about. I read every comment, seriously. I don't read every comment seriously, but I read every comment, and so, I'm always listening, I'm always paying attention, I'm here for you guys, and that's what the Vodkast is about. Not the most popular thing on the channel, but I don't care. I'm going to keep doing them, going to keep answering questions, because it's a tricky, complicated world out there, the audio world. It's scary, and if I can sort of shine some light on it and help people get on a better path with their production, mixing, mastering, then that's awesome. I feel good about that. So, let's get started with the first question. It comes to us from Pablo Torres. He goes, I am Pablo Torres. I go to Agua Fria High School in Arizona, and I want to ask you some questions. He goes, I'm doing this for a school project. Do you want this project to be good, Pablo? All right, I'll get into the questions. For sure. I'm just kidding. How did you become a producer, he asks. It was like a fly. How did I become first of all, producer is kind of a misnomer in my view, which means it's not the right word for what producers do. Producer, in the classical sense of the word, in the audio world anyway, the old way was a producer would be the person that would like set up studio time, organize the session players, figure out the budget, all that stuff. Now a producer is like anyone who has Ableton. And to me, that's not what a producer is. People of Ableton, the beat makers, whatever, they're artists in my view. That's what we should be calling each other, not producers. An actor doesn't produce a performance. Like, they're actors. They bring artistry to what they do. Just like a director, doesn't just direct a movie. He or she brings their artistry to what they do. So I would think of myself as kind of an artist. Even if you're mixing or mastering, there's artistry involved, especially in mixing. You're coming in, you're taking separate parts, and you're melting them together into something really beautiful, and something that's going to touch people and maybe convince someone that they should leave their life as a, mortgage claims adjuster and become a musician or something. That's what we do. We don't produce, we create art. So I would say, when did I become how did I become a producer, an artist? Just by doing it and taking it seriously. That's what separates producers or artists from a lot of other people who just kind of, not that there's anything wrong, do it on the side or kind of do it or whatever. It's if you sort of shift your life around, and I shifted my life around to become a producer and to take it seriously and to do it full time and to put money into it as well, and starting the channel, blah, blah, blah. You don't really need formal education to be a music producer or a composer or an arranger. I talked about this guy that I knew. His name was Luke, and he had a kitchen. He had a restaurant, called it Luke's Kitchen, and he's now a very accomplished chef. He's here in Toronto, and he was asked, where'd you go to school? He goes, I didn't go to school. He's like, I don't know why people go to school when there's all these great books lying around about cooking. Seriously, that's what he said. So it's like a film critic. You're like, when did you decide to become a film critic? When I started calling myself a film critic, I just started doing it, started putting blogs out, or started whatever, writing. You don't go to school to be a film critic. So it's really more about your actions than the title. It's what you do, what you create, what you bring to your artistry. So that's, so how did I do that? I just started doing it. I'm sorry if that's not a very fun answer, but just because I wanted to be. I got started, that's how. So who inspired you? Well, when it comes to like composing and stuff like that, I mean, a lot of the people I like are like Arvo. I think it's Arvo, not Avro. I always say Avro. It's Arvo Part is incredible. I love a lot of the guys who came from the indie scene. So, Trent Reznor and Cliff Martinez and Johnny Greenwood, Radiohead, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Nine Inch Nails. I like people who are sort of unconventional in their approach to composing, but I like a lot of the classical composers. I guess I don't really like John Williams, but it's not because like I'm a snob or anything, and I have like serious critical things to say about his composing. That style of composing doesn't really interest me. I prefer much more ambient stuff. Like for example, Johan Johansson. He did Arrival, and he's really sort of ascending now in the ranks of like modern composers. He's my John Williams, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, so those are the kind of people that inspire me. When did I start? Oh boy. Well, it depends. I mean, I've always been making music. I think a lot of people feel that way. Like, I started when I first, picked up a drumstick at, 9 years old, and I hit the drum. That's when I started becoming a producer or an artist. I've always been making music, and I guess I started composing really formally about 3-4 years ago, and I started to take it seriously, as in, spend money, go to audio engineering school, better myself, add to my skill set. I did that I guess last year, or 2 years ago, come to think of it, is when I was in audio engineering school. Not 2 years ago, but a year. But anyway, so yeah, hopefully that answers your question. How much fun is it, is one of your questions. I don't know. It's the payoff is fun. The work is always, it's hard work, but it doesn't feel like work when you're enjoying it and you're really passionate about it, and when you have a good project. Forgive me, by the way, if I'm not answering these questions in a sort of bullet point, Twitter way. There's no easy way to answer them if you're me. It's a lot of fun. It can be life's greatest rapture. It can also be extremely stressful, and it can send you to the pharmacy for pills. It's anything. And that's kind of what's exciting about it, is that it's never one thing. It's always evolving. It's a moving target. It's deadlines. It's, I can't go to this party because I just got an email from the director. It's, I'm being invited to a casting party, blah, blah, blah. Like it's a whole bunch of things. So fun would be, I guess, one way to put it some of the time, but it really changes and evolves depending on the project, the nature of the project. But at the end of the day, I think if, by the time I get to my final days, I will have said that I had fun as a producer and as a composer. So hopefully that answers your question. How much does it pay? Not very much, unless you are extremely accomplished and, the Hans Zimmers of the world or whatever. It really takes a long time to make it. If you're an audio engineer, if you're a composer, if you're an arranger, if you're a mixing engineer, a mastering engineer, I would say if you're thinking about doing this, or if anyone is thinking about doing this, that question is really something you can only answer after about 5 to 10 years. So get ready to stay in this industry for about 8 to 10 years before you can really say, oh, it pays this much. And there are some people for whom that is not the case, like Daniel James, who has a channel, who's a big guy on YouTube, great guy. I've never met him. great guy, great, wonderful guy. He found success very early composing for video games, and that's very uncommon. You don't just start doing it and then you're that good that you just, he said that he always wanted to compose. He heard Metal Gear Solid music and just loved it. No, that's what he wanted to do. And then I think just like maybe 5 years later, he was composing for that huge Japanese franchise, or I mean, so it doesn't happen like that for everyone. So get ready to stay in it for the long haul. When it does pay, I mean, listen, pay should be a byproduct of whatever I mean, if you're becoming a doctor because the paycheck is good, like, that's a bad sign. You know what I mean? Never do it for the money. If you're going into anything, the pay should be a byproduct of your success, and your success should be measured or gauged by, how much you're helping other people, or how much you enjoy it intrinsically, or just how much you feel like you've accomplished some goals at the end of the year, at the end of the day, or whatever. It should never be like, oh, I made this much money, therefore I'm successful. Pay is a byproduct. It's something that comes sort of in spite of all the other stuff that's happening. So don't go into this industry if you think there's a big paycheck waiting for you, because for a lot of people, they're still waiting 10, 15, maybe 20 years. One time, I've never actually talked about this, I put an ad on Craigslist seeking a composer, and I did this because I was really interested to see how other people were marketing themselves, and just whatever. It's not like, it's kind of sneaky, but it's not like illegal. But I did it, and I got a lot of responses. A lot of people, like, in those classic emails, like, all lowercase and no punctuation. It's just awful. And then I got one from a guy who was like a serious, legit composer. I'm not going to mention him by name, but he'd composed for like reality TV. I think he'd worked on a couple of Disney movies, everything. And I was like, here's a guy who is accomplished, but he's answering a Craigslist ad. Like, that is, and he's made it, as far as I can tell, he's made it. He's got a big IMDb resume, but he's answering a Craigslist ad. Like, that is what life is like for some people who reach, maybe he's not really at the top, it just looks like he is, but that can be, you can be 4 kids and maybe you're working, like I said, as a claims adjuster doing composing on the side, and you still haven't made it, even though you've devoted a lot of energy and resources to it. It's just the way it is. So, man, don't do it for the money, because that's just the wrong way to chase a dream. But that wasn't even your question. It was, how much does it pay? Not very much. I think that's all your questions. Hopefully I answered those in a way that satisfies the school project in Arizona at Agua Fria. What is that, like free water or something? I don't know. Let's move on to another question from Akash. Akash? I don't know. Number 1. There's a lot of questions here, but, I'm going to read them out. So he goes, number 1, how do I manage expectations of a client efficiently? Again, really good Scotch. He writes, a lot of times information exchange about the kind of music required between the filmmaker and the composer becomes a little vague / ambiguous. It's mostly adjectives that are completely subjective to interpretation, or a reference track that they want almost replicated, which is worse. As a composer, what's the common language you use with a filmmaker to communicate ideas coherently? This is a great question. I've talked about this a bit on the Vodkast before. A lot of people who go into film school are never taught how to communicate with composers. A lot of them don't have a musical background, and that's okay. They've decided to focus on something else, and they're the expert in that, and you're the expert in music. So it's up to you to sort of say, this is what you do, music is what I do, and as a professional, you should say that if you feel you are one, and if you've been paid, I guess technically you are a professional. Here's what I think the score needs. Because sometimes, the thing is, this question could go in a bunch of different directions. Let's just scale back a little bit. There's a tool that I use. Many composers use it. Almost everyone does. It's called a cue sheet, and I've talked about it on, check out my videos on like how to compose for trailers. This is an agreement between the director and the composer. It could be the producer and the composer, whoever's talking about music with you from the film. And it's a roadmap where you punch in the time codes. So 2 minutes and 40 seconds and 23 milliseconds where Q1 is going to start. And there's a box for them to write in the description or to even copy and paste a YouTube link to the sound that they want. And this is a roadmap that sort of helps you and the director decide what's going to be where, what's going to sound like what. And I guess your question is more like, how do we even get to talking about a cue sheet? How do we get to finding a common language about, what kind of music the film is going to need? More often than not, you'll see when you work with a director, they'll be like, I don't really know what I'm looking for, and then all you have to do is say, well, what kind of music do you like? You know, what kind of music do you like in your own life? And they'll talk about movies they like or whatever, and go, well, do you think the music in that movie at that scene might be something fitting? Because I have some ideas too. I can send you some links, and then you get a conversation going. So you're not talking about like, well, I think we should have a chamber orchestra here, and we should really have some, you know, glissandi violins, and then there should be a big crescendo at like the 5-minute emotional mark, and like that's you know, in 4/4 time. And no, just say, send me the reference music and I'll explain what I'm feeling from this reference music and if I think it's appropriate for the scene, and I'll bounce back some ideas that I have. And honestly, YouTube and the internet is crazy. It's so helpful because everything is just there. And I should mention, a lot of times what directors and composers do, typically in the formal sense, whenever they're about to score a film, is they'll do a spotting session where they sit down with one another and watch the entire movie, you know, starting and stopping it, writing things down and going, what'd you think of that scene? I'm kind of getting, and you sort of have a rough sketch of all the music that's going to be in there. And this is something that's done way before any music is written. So try and have a spotting session over email. You watch the movie, punch in the timelines, whatever, if you're doing this over email, you know, punch in the time codes and be like, I was thinking this, YouTube clip. I was thinking about this for this scene, YouTube clip, SoundCloud link, whatever. That's how you should do it. Sometimes you have directors who have composed music before, and that can be a friggin' nightmare because they are backseat composing. You know, they'll go, I was a composer, so, you know, let me tell you, you know, we're really sort of these two minds, aren't we? We have this great connection, and you're going like, oh my gosh, you're going to backseat compose the entire time. And that's happened before. I've had one person on a very recent project who established themselves as, you know, just so you know, I'm a composer too. So, you know, I really understand the process and everything. And I'm just like, oh my God. Luckily, things shifted where I wasn't working with that person anymore as far as the communication went. I was working with a bunch of other people who were way more just like, I don't know anything about composing, but I trust you. And that's what you want. You want to be trusted. You don't want to be working with someone who's like high-fiving you all the time, be like, I thought of that too, I'm a composer. No, you want them to do what they do well and you to do what you do well. And sometimes it just takes a quick conversation to go, listen, as a musician, as a professional, here's what I'm just going to tell you what I think the film needs, and it's my responsibility to tell you that. You might go to someone else, they might have other ideas, but as a professional musician and composer, it's my responsibility to say, I think this scene needs this, and that scene needs that, and I'm going to send you the YouTube links so it's all very crystal clear. So that may be what you have to do. Number 2. Could you give us upcoming composers any idea of the rates charged in the industry by skill/experience level? This is one I have trouble figuring out. How do I price my work? What is the industry standard? How do I manage the skill versus experience scale? Well, I have a couple videos about this. One of them was like, should you work for free? I'll link it. It'll pop up in a card or something. Go watch that. And then I have another video about how much composers should charge, which is really a conversation about strategies when you're negotiating your fee and your rate. I'll tell you, no composer, including me, is going to tell you what they make and what they charge. It's just not going to happen. Now, that gets tricky, right? So how do you find out what the baseline is? How do you find out what the asking rate is for whatever? My tips for that would be, do what I did a while ago, which is pretend to be a client, a director that is seeking a composer, and start pumping out emails on Craigslist, on Mandy.com. If you're in Canada, I don't think you are. I think you're in, I don't remember where you said you're from, but I think you have access to Mandy actually, no matter where you are in the world. So Mandy.com, put an ad out for a composer. Say, you know, paid composer, blah, 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 blah. I need 5 minutes of music, whatever the amount that, you know, amount of music that you would be putting out, like if you wanted to get in touch with the director. So just mirror that in the email, but be a client looking for someone to make music. And when someone responds to you, ask, what are your rates? And just do that with everyone. I mean, you're kind of trolling them a little bit, but it's not illegal, and it's a good way for you to get an idea of what there is out there. There's a website called payscale.com or something like that. They might have good indications of what a composer gets paid, but it might be like the Hans Zimmer rate and not like the Joe Blow with a mic and a YouTube channel. You know what I mean? Rate. So yeah, I'm sorry, I can't just like be like, oh, here's my rate, because it's not even going to make sense, because my rate is something that I've built up And it changes from client to client. Some people I've worked with a long time. I've developed and established a relationship with them. And so the pay scale goes up sort of logarithmically every time we work on a project because we trust each other. We've worked together before and I deliver for them. And sometimes it's a bit more adjusted because I'm working with a new client with whom I want to form a long-term relationship with. So it goes down a little bit, so there's all kinds of little things here and there that need to be considered. But I would say watch those 2 videos. And if you have more questions, email me. But I think that at the end of the day, you should be pricing at a rate that's commensurate with what you have to offer into your experience and your skill set. So if you've done a lot of projects before, forget about how great your website is and all that stuff. It's your work, it's your past, it's your pedigree. If you have a lot of projects behind you and a big IMDb list, then you can probably ask for more per hour or flat fee. If you don't have that much, then you can probably ask for less. But make sure that even if you're asking for less or for free, if you're just going to do pro bono work, which is totally fine, make sure that you're still getting something out of the film. And what I mean by that is, for example, when I first started, I was working for free all the time. You have to stop because, by the way, if you just work for free all the time, that's your reputation. You're known as the guy that works for free. So just find a way to wean yourself off eventually. But I would say I will happily produce 2 minutes of music for your little whatever, but I want to make sure that I get the footage so I can use it on my website in my demo reel. So this way, there's still a transaction, right? You're still getting something out of it. There's a tit for tat. If you just compose music and just give it to them, you don't protect it, you don't ask for anything in return, then you're not really getting anything, are you? So you should look for opportunities to add value and market yourself, even if you're working for free. And I think you're totally entitled to some kind of transaction on that level because you are providing a service. Something should be going back your way. And ignore the BS line of like, oh, we can't give you the film, but like, this will be great exposure for you. Like, no, you can't buy a hot dog with like exposure dollars. It's ridiculous. So ask for something back and make sure that it's benefiting your brand and your identity as a composer, producer, whatever. The next thing he writes is, I use Ableton Live 9 for production. Is that a no-go in the industry? No. I use Ableton. I'm kind of switching more to Logic now, but I use Ableton. Everyone uses Ableton, from mixing engineers. People master with Ableton. People compose. Never think that a DAW is a digital audio workstation is meant for one sort of task. I mean, even cheap DAWs like Reaper, $69. It's one of the most capable DAWs out there, and it has a huge fan base and community behind it. So ignore this idea of like, I heard Ableton Live 9 is just for DJs. Should I make movie music with it? Yeah, absolutely. It can do those things. It can handle video really well. So absolutely, it's fine for whatever you want to do. Unless you want to do like photo editing, then don't use Ableton. So you have a mix that you sent me, and we'll listen to it in a second. You said, because I asked you to be more specific, and you said, I want you to talk about my mastering skills. You said that you've worked on them over the past few weeks, and any feedback with respect to the overall sound would be great. I'm sorry, that's not really specific. That's not specific at all. It's not like, I'm looking more for like, how's the bass, how's the kick, is it too loud or whatever, like just anyway. So you've asked me with the compositional value if it evokes emotion. That's a very subjective thing, so I'm not even sure I'll be able to comment on that, but we'll just listen to it and I'll let you know what I think. So let's have a listen to your track, and then after the jump, we'll talk about it. Okay. This is a very good, punchy sounding track. I really don't have that much to say as far as does it evoke emotion or whatever. It sounds like it's something that, would accompany, let's say, someone who was jumping off a cliff in like an action video game or something like that. There's really nothing bad to say about it per se. I mean, I don't. Some of the sounds I don't really like, but it's more subjective. Um, it's mixed fairly well. It sounds like it might be a little bit too loud because keep in mind that if you're mastering something and making it like over 12 LUFS, like up into the 8, 6, 5 territory, which a lot of people are, that's gonna get bumped up even further with a lot of YouTube and SoundCloud, all the rest of it. Their audio converters are going to bump it up a little bit more, and it might come out distorted. So if you have Isotopes Ozone, you can do a codec preview to see how it's going to sound once it makes it past the audio converters on those websites. A lot of these places are going to be loud as normalized. Some of them aren't. So anyway, just I would say a safe place would be like minus 12, minus 13 LUFS if you have an LUFS reader. Isotopes Insight has one. There's a bunch of free ones. Logic has a free one. I don't think Ableton has one. Surprise, surprise. But on the whole, the only thing is just it's a little bit loud. But, as far as the compositional value of it, the arrangement, it sounds fine. A lot of really good tension is built up in there, and I love like the big reverse sweep and the piano thing or whatever. Yeah, very cool. It sounds like you're on a really good path, and I hope that down the road you find yourself in a position to ask for a whole bunch of money and they say yes, and you do a great job and get more experience and ascend in the audio world. So thanks a lot for writing. Sorry if that was underwhelming as a mixed review. It's very good, so I don't have that much in the way of criticism or feedback. So anyway, thank you. All right, the next question comes to us from Mikel. I've been watching your video since your video on composing for trailers and have had good use of your helpful videos. I recently made a long ambient piece for a horror game, so I focused on the transitions, harsh percussion, pads. I will admit I completely over-engineered it because it was such an exciting, an exiting, and fun challenge. I know you meant exciting. My question is, what can I do to improve my transitions between different sections in a soundscape? I used a ton of layering, but I think I need more tools to make nice, smooth transitions. Thanks for your awesome videos. So let's have a listen to, it's like 12 minutes long. We're not going to listen to the whole thing, but let's listen to a little bit. It says Flying Lakutas, Iron Filings. Anyway, let's check it out. Okay, thanks very much for sending that in. Yeah, very creepy. A lot of fun though, and it sounds very good. So I would say that if you're worried about the transitions, if you're going to send that in to a game developer as a demo, then what I would do would be to slice it up, salami it up in Pro Tools or whatever your DAW is, and then name all the tracks separately or something. You don't really have to worry about like adding any more fades or anything. Just maybe add a big fade, at the end of every track or something like that, because the fades are already kind of established in that. But what a lot of people do with their demos is they'll write like an hour long piece of music, slice it up, and then just send it almost like a CD. And I think you can do that here. very easily. I don't think you need to add additional fades, or I mean, if you want, you can add another 15, 20 seconds, or maybe 4 or 5 bars of just, ambient sort of trails or whatever it is. I don't know how it's set up in your DAW, but I didn't find the changes in between moods and, I guess, songs, let's say, in your demo to be too abrupt or what's the word I'm looking for? Too jarring or anything like that. So I think you're on a really good path. And if this is going to be in a video game, at the end of the day, there's going to be a music editor whose job it will be to add those, to layer this track for you. Meaning, when the character in the video game, not every video game works like this, but when the character in the video game, let's say Resident Evil, reaches the top of a mountain peak or whatever, the trip from there to there, I mean, it's almost like the music is like AI at that point. So it has one track playing, but when a new enemy is introduced, things will shift, so that the music will shift, and then on top of the layer of moody, atmospheric or whatever, it's going to fade out, and then it's going to have your, I guess, punchy drums or whatever is going on. And then when that action sequence finishes, there's, basically an algorithm to say that now this action sequence is done, we're going to go back to the other music. So it's really not something you have to worry about in a practical sense or in an artistic sense. I would just say that if you're going to slice this up and send it off to a music production company or something like that, find a way to slice it up very elegantly in your DAW and send it off as one big piece, an EP maybe, 4 or 5 songs deep, and then just wrap it up. So that might require you having to go back into your DAW and just stretch out those fades. Maybe just, honestly, what some people do is they'll just go, they'll write some automation for like 2 bars of music at the very end and just draw a line to add delay and reverb, and then just have it go up gradually. So when the track finishes, it just kind of washes out into the sort of empty space. And you can do that on all your tracks just to sort of cheat your way into creating some sort of exit for all those pieces. But hopefully I've answered your question, and if I didn't, write me again and we'll get back into it. But anyway, let's get to the next question. So this question is from Rob. He says, "Hi Jeff, my name is Rob. I love your videos, especially the Vodkast." Thank you very much, Rob. It means a lot. I suffer from extreme writer's block. I have written what I believe to be great full songs in the past, but this is rare. Most of the time I have a strike of inspiration. I produce about 8 to 16 bars of something that sounds really good, but then I just can't do anything else. I always get stuck and I feel like I can't write anything else. So my question to you is, how do I go about combating writer's block? I really believe that I have something to say with my music, but it's so frustrating that I struggle so much to get past the first hurdle. Much love, Rob. Oh boy. This is... Okay, I need to take a drink. I need to take a sip here. I struggle. You can tell I'm getting emotional because I'm curling up my wrist. I'm getting all weird here. I struggled with this issue, and I think everyone has. So the first thing is that you're not alone. As you know, there are entire movies devoted to writer's block. So it's a universal thing. And my advice probably isn't going to help you, but in case it doesn't help, I'll tell you right now. I made a video. It was one of the first things I ever did. Like, I'm thinner and younger looking and more virile. You can go check that out. I'll link it in a card. And basically it was all about, tips for how to get past all this sort of stuff. Writer's block, how to finish songs, start songs, stay focused. It's all there. So please watch it. So that is if this advice that comes now doesn't help. So the advice that comes now is basically, writer's block ended very quickly for me when I started to put myself out there and start asking for work and start getting good enough to a place where I could find clients that wanted to pay me for music. What I mean by that is, to me, the writer's block is done when a client needs something, because there's nothing more motivating than, someone on the other end of an email, or someone who has money for you, who's going to help you in your career, build and grow and all the rest of it, who's mad because you can't produce something. It's just, there's something about that kind of pressure that forces you to deliver. So when I moved from just like, I'm a bedroom producer or whatever, to like the client relationship, that changed everything. Because even if you're writing music for like your girlfriend or boyfriend, it's not the same thing, because they will be lenient with you and they'll be understanding, and they might, you might get distracted and go do something else and forget, and then that project will be another one of 20 or 15 on a hard drive somewhere. I would say that if you're not interested in entering that in that kind of mindset and starting to produce music for clients and all the rest of it, then maybe hold yourself accountable to in a smaller sense. So let's say you're writing something for, let's say Christmas is coming or Valentine's Day is coming up, and you're like, you just tell your partner or whatever, your family, like, I'm working on a song that really conveys how I feel about Christmas and being with you guys, and I'm going to make sure that it's ready in time for when I come to visit. And this way, if you keep talking about it, then you kind of owe it to yourself to actually finish it and complete it. And that could be one way to do it. I remember kind of doing that way back in high school with like 2 songs that I was writing, and there was like a Battle of the Bands thing. We had 2 or 3 songs lined up, but I was like, I'm going to write these songs, we're going to rehearse them, and I'm going to have them ready. And the whole band was like, oh, I can't wait, awesome. And I think I actually did it just because I set a personal goal for myself, and my band, even though they weren't going to pay me money or they weren't a girlfriend or whatever, had the expectation there that I was going to deliver on these couple of songs. So I just kept talking about it and telling everyone. And when you tell everyone, like, it's like you kind of shoot yourself in the foot, because if it goes wrong, you've hyped it up and then you look really foolish. You know what I mean? Anything in life, you say, oh, I have this amazing opportunity, and everyone's like, oh, how's that going, by the way? How's that going? And then you're like, yeah, it didn't work out. And then everyone knows it didn't work out, and you're like, why did I tell everyone? So if you start telling people that you're going to be doing something, that something's going to come out soon, then maybe that sort of pressure will force you to commit to actually realizing that goal. Maybe it won't. And if it doesn't, go and watch the tips that I had or whatever in my previous video on the channel. Hopefully they'll help. Just write back again if it doesn't help, or whatever. We can work it out. We can figure something out. I noticed you also sent a mix. I'm sorry, I just don't have time to get to it now, but I think that what I just said and going back and watching the videos might help get you out of your writer's block and maybe give you some ideas about where to take it next. I'm really sorry. I hate doing this. I can't play the mix. It's just we're already going over time with this vodcast, so maybe I'll answer it in a future episode if you're mad at me, and you're totally allowed to be mad at me. Let's move on to the next and final question. Okay, so David Reeves asks, I recently bought Isotope's mixing and mastering software, Neutron and Ozone. Neutron and Ozone. With an eye to learning as much as I can to improve my pieces. So I quickly discovered this is a massive undertaking, and I'm flailing around trying to find the best place to start. Often when using Isotope Neutron on tracks, I have difficulty perceiving much in the way of differences, particularly when applying compressors. Would you have any advice on how to listen effectively so as to detect what the impact of the mixing software is? That's not what you wrote, but I stumbled to the end of that sentence. Yes. If you're new to mixing, and hopefully I'm not insulting your intelligence here, but if you're new to mixing and all the rest of it, you might not know, but there's a button called bypass, and it's found probably in Ozone on the bottom right-hand side. And you can do a global bypass, which just means before and after, right? A-B, before you introduced any compression, any EQ or whatever, and after. There's also individual switches, I think in the form of little power buttons, on the individual modules in Neutron. So you can you can just have a listen, solo, let's say the vocal, let's say you have something on a vocal or a keyboard track, and then do a bypass so you can hear the before and after. What's happening before you've done a little adjustment on your EQ at, let's say, 20,000 hertz or whatever, and after. And that is a great way to show you exactly what's going on with the digital signal processing that Neutron or Ozone is bringing to your track. And I know for sure in Ozone that the bypass option is on the bottom right hand side. I know that for sure. So that's where that is there. But there's also individual toggles for all the modules in Ozone and in Neutron. And maybe I'll just I'll include a little graphic or something just so you can really see where it's at. And again, hopefully I'm not insulting your intelligence. You said you're new to mixing and all the rest of it, so that's where I would go, is look at the bypass button. It's so important to A-B, and I think that is going to maybe demystify some things for you and clear some things up. Outside of that, if that's not what you're really asking, then I don't know what you're asking. What you could be asking instead is like, what's the difference? How do I perceive the difference between different compressors and all the rest of it? If that's your question, just write to me and we can do a video on that. I can explain how to perceive, because every EQ has a sound. It's not just boosting and cutting. People think that it is. People are just like, oh, I don't like this EQ. No. The EQs are actually, just by virtue of them being EQs built by either a person with components, real components, or even EQs in the digital space, they have components in them which give them a sound. So when you're boosting with, let's say, a FabFilter Pro Q2 at 20 hertz, you're going to be boosting at 20 hertz. But if you do it with a different compressor, it's going to sound a little bit different. The color of that EQ is going to be different from EQ to EQ. So that's why some people are very sort of religious and, sort of monotheistic. I only use isotope stuff, or I only use FabFilter, I only use analog stuff, because those things impart a certain color and sound and flavor to their music. So if that's what you're asking, we can do a video on that. But if what you're asking is the bypassing issue, I think that's going to clear up so much for you. But yeah, so solo, whatever you're working on, bypass on and off. Bypass the compressor, bypass the EQ and all the rest of it. It might be called AB. I doubt it. It's probably just going to be called bypass. And hopefully that gets you on a good path with that question. The next question you have for me is, in regard to their Insight software, so Isotope's Insight software. I like how I'm becoming the expert for Isotope. Hint, hint. And their loudness meter, LUFS. I found that I had to considerably lower the volume on all tracks in any piece for which I applied LUFS to stay under the loudness levels defined for the US. This was even though all the tracks originally had reasonable headroom and my overall master track was below 0 dB and showed no clipping. I appreciate the fact that standards are needed, but am I doing something wrong? Is it your experience that the loudest standards result in a much lower track and master level than would be if they were near 0 dB on the master? Would you comment on the loudness standards? That is, are they generally used in your industry? Is there any practical reason that I should try to work within the LUFS standards, considering I'm mostly doing this for my own entertainment? Okay. This is a really tricky question because we could get ourselves into knots very easily. I would just say that for your purposes, what you're doing, get to a level you're comfortable with on a full scale meter. So, the one that you're using, or say you go to near 0 dB, it's dBFS, which is full scale, which is digital. Get to a place where that sounds good in your own metering system on whatever DAW that you're using, and just leave it at that. If you're uploading stuff commercially or whatever, then we have to worry about limiting. We have to worry about how much headroom we should place on our limiter. We should worry about where we fit in the LUFS sort of, because that is the global standard now. Where we should fit in that system, and also where we should fit in that system relative to the loudness normalization technology featured in streaming services like Spotify and all the rest of it. For your purposes, just for entertainment, get it to a place where it's, I don't know, maybe -6 or -7 dB away from full scale to 0 on your meter, and that's good. Just leave it there. I'd say because you're only doing home entertainment, leisure stuff, I wouldn't worry too much about this other mastering LUFS stuff. It can get really tricky, and without a concrete example with a track that you've sent to me where you said, like, here's what it sounds like, here's what, and we have multiple, then I might have a really hard time diagnosing the problem. So I would say, for your own purposes, get it to a place where it's comfortable on that meter and leave it there. If you want to have a target in LUFS, I would say if you're going to be uploading it to YouTube or whatever, the bottom line is -12 LUFS. That's it. Leave it at -12 LUFS. That's plenty loud. It might not be as loud as Drake, but it's loud. And if people want, they can just turn up the knob on their, their home systems and get things louder. You know what I mean? Like, the radio, YouTube doesn't own the volume level, the knob, you do. So if you want a quick and dirty, just simple readout, -12 LUFS, I would say in your other software, if we're talking about an RMS meter or a dB meter, -6, -7 away from unity gain. and just leave it there. Any more than that, we get into distortion, we get into another discussion about limiting and all the rest of it, and that's a whole other ball of wax, which I'm happy to talk about if you want to write a follow-up question or whatever. But hopefully the information that I've just provided suffices for your own purposes, which sound like just it's hobbyist level, which is great. So I would say just leave it at that. Hopefully I haven't confused you even more, but again, if I have, go and check out, write to me, check out the other videos on my channel, and also I would recommend you start following a guy named Ian Shepherd. If you really want to, if you have time on your hands, he does nothing but discuss loudness, where loudness is heading, why loudness doesn't matter, and we actually had a conversation about it on a previous Vodkast. Ian Shepherd, mastering engineer. I'll leave a card or whatever in this video, so you can just click on that and watch that link and learn a little bit more. He actually really brings the knowledge to this subject. I'm only sort of, it's like a master-servant relationship. I am the servant. But hopefully this helps you for your own purposes. And I know that you had some more questions for me about a mix, so I'll definitely get back to you on that in email like you requested. So anyway, I think that's it for today. Oh my goodness, I can see the light has changed. Wow, I've been here for a while. So thanks very much to everyone who wrote in. Please write to me at vodcastpodcaster@gmail.com. Tweet me at Jeff Manch there with the hashtag Vodcast. I will answer your questions. I will try and help as best I can. Help and not hurt your music productions. But that's it. Thanks for watching. Happy 2017. Way more videos coming your way. Thanks.